Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to a brand new film review. Today, me and Tate are going to be reviewing Charlie Kaufman's latest film, which you can find on Netflix, with a very cheery title, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So
Yeah.
if you're new to Charlie Kaufman, then that might not mean anything to you. If you know Charlie Kaufman, then that is a very fitting title. It's based on the book of the same name from 2016 by Ian Reid, I think you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And I literally just got done watching this film about an hour ago. This was a very cheerful morning movie to watch on a Saturday morning. And of course, this is pre-recorded, so you guys will be seeing this later on this evening. We're recording this around midday kind of time, and you will be seeing this, well, you'll know what the time is, around 8 p.m. UK time at this point. But yeah, lot to sort of dissect with this movie. It's a very complex film. It's a film with lots of symbolism in there, which again isn't unlike many of other Kaufman films. So you actually, how long ago did you see this film?
I saw it day of release, so I'm not actually sure when. 4th of September, I would say. Yeah. Or did I watch it day after? I watched it on that weekend, so opening kind of few days that it was available. So I've had a week to mull over this film. I've had a week to kind of come to terms with it and kind of figure it out. And I think the first thing that I said to you was this film is more confusing than Tenet, which both you and George were quite surprised about on the chat. I mean,
after 3 viewings of Tenet, I will now agree with you.
Yeah, I stick by that. This film is a little bit confusing. Had to kind of search it up afterwards to try and figure out what exactly happened. I will say it'll probably help if you actually read the book and have that prior knowledge going into this. But some people don't have that opportunity. I didn't realize it was a book. I thought it was actually a stage or radio play, especially from watching the film. It feels like it would work well as a stage or radio play. There's not many locations in the film at all, and it's a lot of kind of inter-dialogue between people. So there's no action sequences. There's no kind of real standout moments. It's all from the voices. It's all from kind of how they're able to act it out on the screen, which is nice. It's a change up from a lot of films that we see nowadays. Even the Oscar films have something that they throw in which kind of takes it away from that just watching people acting experience. I think Marriage Story was the only one really from last year which I could truly say was like just watching an acting experience. It wasn't to do with the editing. It wasn't to do with any of the other things. It was just the actors. And we've seen that with Kaufman before. We've seen it with Synecdoche, New York, which plays out in a very similar way. Anomalisa, which was taken from a radio play, which he wrote himself. So this being his third now directed film, I liked it. I did like it. It's a positive review. I did want to say that. It was confusing, but you take the elements of the acting, you take the elements of just kind of the uneeriness of the film. Because there was one thing that you kind of mentioned, and I mentioned it as well. The film just has an uneasy tone.
Oh yeah. It's
it really digs into that kind of unnerving levels, which thrillers don't always go to. Thrillers are always there to kind of shock you or keep you on the edge of your seat. This one made me sink back into mine, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before I go into my reviews, we probably should have done this at the beginning, a little bit late to the party, but socials, because this is going to be a very in-depth discussion, and I don't want to kind of break away from that. So if we just get this done right about now. So do be sure to comment below. As I said, this is pre-recorded, but, you know, please still get your comments in. Let us know what you think of I'm Thinking of Ending Things if you've seen it, or indeed any of other Charlie Kaufman's work if you're a fan, if you've seen anything before. You can follow us on Facebook. It's at Cinema Savvy. Twitter is cinema_savvy, and we also do have t-shirts, by the way, link in the description down below, but, which we're not wearing today, but you'll just have to imagine it. I guess I
was going to say, just to add on to that, we're also pushing for 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so please help us meet that goal. Please share off our channel to as many people as possible, so that we can get a wide outreach and a wide discussion, because that's really what we're all here for. We're here to discuss movies, and we just want people to discuss it back with us. So Chris, your thoughts on I'm Thinking of Ending Things, please.
My thoughts on I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Well, first off, I want to carry on talking about the tone, what you mentioned. Probably not quite as shocking as this movie that I'm going to compare it to, but in terms of the overall mood of it and the uneasiness and the unsettling quality of it, and the dreamlike quality as well, or nightmarish even in parts, It kind of reminded me of Aronofsky's Mother, which is a film that both me and you like, but just that really.
All I want to do is bring light back into this film.
There we go. God, it's been a while since we've said that.
It has been a while.
But yeah, just that really unnerving quality of. I mean, I was watching this film, and it's very dreamlike how it's structured. It's very non-linear. There's many cutaways to different storylines and different scenarios that are happening. And at first you think you're following it perfectly. The plot seems, it's very introspective. There's internal monologue from the main character. Let me just bring up the actress real quick. Jessie Buckley is credited as the young woman, which we'll talk about when we sort of get into the spoiler section later on towards this thing. She's framed as the main character at the beginning of the film, and there's a lot of internal monologue. It's very, these words will probably crop up many times throughout this review, nihilistic, very existential, deconstructing the world and the human condition and what it is to be alive and everything, which is a theme that runs pretty much through all of Kaufman's films. And you think you're following it, and they get to this location. They're in this new budding relationship. They've only been in a relationship together for about 6 weeks. And she's heading to visit his parents' house. That's the sort of initial plot on paper. And when they get to that house, that's when the weird stuff starts happening. There are certain... there's a part where they go to a farmhouse, like the barn outside with the animals. And I don't want to go completely into it because I do want people to check out this movie and experience it for themselves. And these very weird things are being said. And then we get into the house and we meet the parents themselves. And it's like a horror movie. And I want to talk about how it's actually shot as well. So on Netflix, it's in a 4:3 ratio, which is where you've got it's a very sort of condensed image with the black bands either side, which added to that sense of claustrophobia and that feeling of being trapped. The editing is very clever. The camera work as well. There's moments where you don't quite know what to believe, and things are appearing in frame, then disappearing in frame in the next shot. And the way the camera is, there are moments where it's with them at the table and it's covering all of the characters and the eye lines and everything like that. But then there'll be a camera that's sort of back out in the hallway, and it's almost like looking in like an observer, sort of stepping out of yourself, looking back in on yourself. And all these little tricks of the trade and everything are all amounting, and it's just a really horrible, oppressive atmosphere. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, you want to have an uneasy horror atmosphere, and it's kind of 2019, 2020. You bring in Toni Collette.
Yeah.
That is just who you bring in for that. And it was so good seeing her. I still haven't seen Hereditary. Haven't brought myself to seeing it yet. But I've heard fantastic things about her in that film. And also nice to see David Thewlis as well.
Yes, so obviously returning from Anomalisa as well, because he voiced the main character in that film. I've always loved Thewlis, and I knew I recognized the mother from somewhere, and then I checked back through her credits, and it's Hereditary. I think that's where I'm remembering her from.
Well, I'm remembering her from Knives Out as well, but she wasn't playing a horror character in Knives Out, but she is definitely playing a horror character here.
In Hereditary, she was fantastic in Hereditary. She deserves some kind of nomination for that film. But again, it's a horror film, so nothing gets a nomination. But yeah, no, she's all the cast. Really, you've sort of got a cast of sort of 4 people, really. Yes, you do have some, you have some supporting characters and other recurring characters and everything like that. But your main core cast are the 2 people in the relationship and then the parents. And I kind of like that. It does almost feel like maybe this could be a play, but I think that this film does something that maybe you wouldn't be able to get across in like a stage production or anything like that, in terms of the editing and how it's cut and everything. But the house itself, the fact that it's on a farm, the fact that it's creepy, there's a weird kind of parental and like creepy mother figure. The scratches on the basement door in the main entrance, I was getting sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes from this thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but you walk into you know how you've got like the metal sliding door and the talk of the pigs and everything, and the mom and this weird sort of tension-filled relationship. I was getting Psycho vibes with Norman Bates and Mother. So I don't know if that was an inspiration or anything like that, but I was definitely getting those vibes when I was watching this film at that part of the film.
Don't talk about creepy things and then have my door slammed, Chris. That's just not good.
The timing there.
That's just not good. I was getting those kind of vibes as well. it just feels uneasy. Even the lighting and stuff like that. Even the color palette. I mean, we've got it here as our background right now. So you're able to kind of look at it and kind of take a deep dive into what it actually looks like and stuff like that. But it is kind of like muted tones, kind of
natural lighting.
Kind of natural lighting. Yeah, it kind of almost throws shade onto her face and stuff like that, even in the poster, which you can see kind of all around you right now. I also want to give a shout out to Jesse Plemons, who plays the main character of, or one of the main characters, I'd say, of Jake. He was known for quite a long time in the film community as Meth Damon, the person who looks like Matt Damon, but not quite. Then he did Black Mirror. He did a fantastic episode, and that was absolutely phenomenal as an actor. I want to say he got nominated from that. Do you want to check? Nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys. Yeah, he was nominated for Outstanding Lead Actor. He was also nominated for Fargo as well, which I haven't seen, but I've heard good things about him being in that as well. His character is also very uneasy. There's a lot of uneasy characters in this, and the combination of them together kind of just makes the film unsettling to watch. It's very difficult to not spoil this film. I feel like we're going to go into spoilers in a bit, but just the general outlook of the film, because it's very difficult to say things without actually ruining the film for people, is that the film is incredibly uneasy as far as an experience is concerned. Has incredible acting with people in deep monologues, deep conversations with each other. You can tell it's a Kaufman film.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That makes sense. And
from the opening line of the film, you know it's a Kaufman film.
The Kaufman films are all about the screenplays, and this film absolutely adds to that. It really does. But all I can say is I enjoyed the film, and I don't think I can actually say any more without spoiling anything, because this film is very spoiler heavy from about an hour in. The final hour of the film is just like a what the fuck happened there, and you have to go and research it afterwards. And the second we reveal what actually happened, when we go into spoilers, it's like, Chris, if you wanted to add anything else before we...
Sorry, we just lost you there for a second.
Oh, sorry.
You sort of like, what? And then you froze in like mid-woe.
That's fine.
No, I was just you mentioned Jesse Plemons being in in Fargo. Sorry, I just checked, and Jesse Buckley is also in Fargo as well. So they have that shared connection there. I haven't seen Fargo.
The two main characters of the film are both actors named Jesse.
Yes,
been a nightmare on set. Jesse. Okay, yep, that one. But yeah.
But I've just had a look at some of her other credits. She was in Judy, which I watched last year. I think I vaguely remember who she was in there. And in terms of TV, she was in Chernobyl as well. So she's definitely an up-and-coming actress, I would say. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the roles that she does in the future, because I honestly thought the two leads were fantastic in this film. Sort of final thoughts before we get into spoilers. I do want to say this is a film that's absolutely ripe for interpretation.
Oh, so heavily interpreted, because we both had different things coming out of this.
Yeah. So we say it's going to be spoilers, but in a way, like, we are going to be talking about specifics and sort of the events that happen at the end of the film.
Our interpretation of those events
could be wildly different. Like, we could be way off the mark. We don't live in Charlie Kaufman's mind, which is probably a blessing. But you know, there's probably like 1,000,001 ways to deconstruct, and any person watching this film can walk away with something completely different. So we say it's spoiler territory, but really it's just sort of interpretation territory, where we're going to be dissecting a few of the things from this film. So I think we really need to start with almost like the second narrative that runs alongside, parallel, intercut with the film, with the character, the very mysterious character of the janitor at the school.
Yes.
So throughout the film, you get references to this character. He's sort of looking through walls, looking in at events that are happening at the farmhouse. It's sort of almost like this sort of parallel dimension thing, almost looking in. He's sort of walking the school corridors. He's seeing plays be performed, dances being performed in the corridors.
Oklahoma being performed.
Oklahoma specifically being performed, yes. There's all these little elements which have reference and parallels to the main storyline that's happening at the farmhouse. Slippers as well towards the end of the film. I was going to say something else as well, and then the uniforms, the janitor uniforms that the main character of the young woman finds in the washer dryer at the farmhouse. So you get all these little bits, and it kind of comes to a head at the end in a very perplexing, literally dreamlike way. There's a whole scene at the end of the film.
A dream sequence. That's the best way.
It's an interpretive dance, yeah, and it's kind of reminds me
interpretive dance, an animated pig, and an award ceremony featuring songs from Oklahoma. To which anyone who's watching this review who has no idea what we're talking about, neither did we when we finished the film.
Oh, no, not a clue. But in hindsight, it kind of reminds me of, I think this film did it in I don't want to say a much more cheery way, because it was still kind of a downer ending, but a bit like La La Land. You know, the projector at the end where it's sort of looking at a life that never happened and the regrets and what could have been if certain things had changed.
3 different endings for anyone who has seen La La Land or not seen La La Land. You have the first ending, which is the kind of dream sequence dance, kind of what happened if he followed her to Paris, and what happened if they just stayed together and stuff like that. What happened if he basically kissed her the first time he met her. The second one, which is the film reel, which shows their actual life, what it actually would have been like, not a dream sequence. That is what they would have been. That is what they could have been. And then the third ending, which is the actual ending we get, where they don't get together and they say goodbye. And
Tayte, I'm getting misty again. I'm getting misty again, Tayte.
But this film does something similar. And we're into the spoiler territory now for this film, because this kind of spoils it. But the way I saw it was the entire film before the ending is one version of an ending. Like, the entire film is meant to be about what could have been. I want to say that is the kind of phrase that could be the entire kind of encompassing story. It's all about what could have been. And the main character isn't Jesse Buckley, the person who is here on the poster, the person who is the narrator at the start, the person on the poster. The actual main character of the story is Jake, the character of Jake, who is played by Jesse Plemons, if you guys are following. The main man in the story, let's put it that way. And the entire film is him looking back on his life and contemplating what could have been if he'd asked this one girl out at a bar this one time. What could have been if he'd kind of lived his life, if he'd been around his parents who passed a long time ago. And his entire life is now, he is the janitor that we've been seeing throughout the entire story, and the janitor is contemplating ending things, whereas the film at the start was saying I'm thinking of ending things, and it was about the relationship, because the main character at the time, Jessie Buckley here, she is thinking of ending the relationship with Jake, but she's going to meet the parents. So it takes one interpretation of I'm thinking of ending things there, but maybe that's his subconscious saying I'm thinking of ending things total, I'm thinking of ending this, yeah. I'm thinking of ending the dream, basically, of us being together. And he's deciding whether he wants to end things or not. And then in the end of the film, he does go outside into the snow, sit in his car, and interpreting how you will, I think he freezes to death. And the dream sequence at the end is his last kind of thoughts of, once again, what could have been. He has an award ceremony about his life. He goes and sings Oklahoma. He's moved forward by an animated pig, which I'm guessing is harkening back to the pig that was maybe dead in his farmhouse at his parents' house.
Oh yeah, it is that, yeah, because the maggots are like dripping off its belly and everything.
Yeah. So that's my interpretation of it. That that's his life done now. That is his interpretation of him ending things. There are many different ways you can look at this ending.
Right, I'm going to deep dive into mine because I agree with much of what you've said, but I do have some things where maybe I'm going to offer something different. So the ending specifically, where he goes to his car and you think that he freezes to death, you think it's a very final, that's it, his last hurrah, Oklahoma, everyone, standing ovation.
Everyone from his life, his parents, the people at the Oklahoma dance, which I'm assuming was happening when he was a kid. Everyone in the film, every single character that's shown up, the people who are working at the ice cream store, everyone.
Everyone's all in like really sort of theatrical old people makeup as well, interestingly, in that scene. It's almost kind of like a hall of waiting, like maybe sort of like a purgatory, maybe, like everyone's all in the same situation.
You're like, is she in purgatory? No, he might be.
Yes, yeah. And it's, all of us age, all of us sort of arrive at the same destination kind of thing, maybe. But the very end of the credits, you hear the engine turn over. and you see some snowfall from the tree. So I think it's a very small amount, but I think there's always like a little pang of hope at the end. You know, he's starting the engine up like it's another new day. The sun's risen. They talk about that earlier, like the sunrise, like days go by and it might not get better. There's always that pang of hope. So I think that if it just ended with the car being still, with no sound, not starting up, I would agree with your assessment of the ending. But because you hear that engine start up again, I think that's symbolizing that he's going to continue. He's going to carry on down this long sort of deserted road of life, I guess. And the pig itself, I was really confused about the pig at first. I do like the 2D hand-drawn animated pig. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. The way that I interpret that, especially when we get towards the ending, is he mentions that the pigs were just sort of lying there, just kind of accepting fate as they were being sort of slowly eaten alive and would eventually die. I guess you kind of have to extrapolate that and put that into real life. That, God, this is going to be like so like it feels like I'm doing like an essay. It seems like I'm doing a dissertation back.
I've already said previously on the channel that if there was like, I have loads of films I would love to do a video essay on and talk about and deep dive into. Synecdoche, New York is one of the top ones that I would go back to and I would talk for hours on, or I would even condense it into a video. If you guys want to see that, then I'll see if I can put one together. But like, for this film, it feels like exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing again. Every Kaufman film, you can look into it and you can go, oh, okay, no, let's look at the symbolism. And some films, I think, they do it and it ends up being kind of douchey. Like, oh, no, you should have just gone with like an actual thing. With these films, I'm completely okay with it. I like the fact that you can interpret it different. I like the fact that there's debate over it in that same sense. It's a good debate instead of the bad debate that like Mulan created.
Oh yeah. Don't worry. I'm going to end like my final thoughts with a comparison to Mulan. Don't worry about that. And weirdly, it's a film that I haven't seen. I've seen the first 3 minutes of. That's all I need to see. But the pig for me was that slowly being eaten alive corresponds to the fact that they talk about that we always think that we're moving through time, but maybe it's time moving past us and we just stay stationary. We don't move and we just sort of let time wash over us. And that's kind of what I extrapolated from the pig, that we all just kind of remain still, accepting fate, slowly being eaten away by time, and then eventually we will all sort of die. This is a very depressing film.
No, it's a depressing film, but at the same time, it is.
There's an element of truth to it, I guess. If you really want to read into it and get like all philosophical with it, and there are lots of mentions to poets and novelists and theorists all the way throughout this movie within the conversation, which clearly Kaufman has read about.
I'd like to kind of hear your opinion on what you think, what your interpretation of it is. I want to hear what your interpretation of the ice cream shop is.
Oh, okay. So
the second one is I want your interpretation of the events that take place during the dance.
I knew you were going to ask me about the dance. God damn you. Right, I'll start with the ice cream store. So this is from the book. I believe I did sort of very quickly read through the plot of the book. There are a lot of similarities. The ending does kind of veer off in a very different direction, I think. But we see later on in the film, the janitor, when he's in the car and he's kind of having a mental breakdown, he sees an old, it almost looks like a sort of like 1930s, 1940s, like black and white advert for the ice cream parlor. So that's clearly a very old brand of ice cream. Maybe it's still going now, but but exactly, it's nostalgic to him. There's that very childlike moment where Jesse Plemons is driving the car and he sings this like wistful tune of the old TV advert. And it feels like a little kid, like, I want to go get some ice cream. And he remembers that. So that to me is just sort of like the last.
I know what your interpretation of this is now. I figured it out.
It's like the last sort of like happy memory. And the girls there, because there's the two sort of ditzy, airheaded blondes, like the very vapid kind of beauty queen ones. And then there's the sort of more reserved, shy, sort of plain Jane kind of girl.
Who says you don't have to go on if you don't want to.
But she says that to the young woman.
Yeah.
But if you're sort of extrapolating that and saying that that's a direct reference to him, because he stands off to the side and he's too nervous to even go up to them. So that's obviously when he was young at school. These were girls at his school who he couldn't approach, he couldn't talk to.
I've got a different interpretation completely. I think this is him going back into a childlike state. I think he went to this ice cream shop a lot when he was younger. And even though they don't show him as a younger self on the screen, that is his younger self visiting the ice cream shop because he doesn't like one of the girls who serves him. And he goes really quiet and kind of sits with his hands crossed and stuff like that. Basically, I think that's what he did when he was a kid. I think that is a memory from his childhood, which he is projecting onto himself.
So who's the young woman in this sequence of events then?
The young woman is just there for the ride. She is just there as part of his journey. She is the way that he comes to terms with thinking of ending things. That's how he's coming to terms with it, which is why she keeps saying, I'm thinking of ending things. And he keeps on going, what? As in, like, are you sure? Kind of like he can hear her thoughts and stuff like that.
Okay.
I also just picked up on something else. It's snowing outside in the film because he's cold and he's about to get into the car to commit suicide. Which I'm saying with a smile, but I'm like, that's so depressing.
And the snow, and remember at the farmhouse where she looks out the window, the snow is falling exclusively just on the car, nowhere else. So there's definitely a reference to that too.
Small little things in the film, like he goes past a brand new set of swings and stuff like that on an abandoned house. That might be kind of his childhood, fresh in his memory, but kind of no one's left there from home because his parents have died. They've moved on and stuff like that. So he's got no one left.
And those childlike moments happen throughout a lot of the movie, especially like the mom and the dad. The way they talk to him is very childlike. They constantly reminisce about his. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say that was one of the things in the film that I wanted to point out. He didn't have much time remembering his parents being young. Yeah. He always remembered his parents being older and kind of in a worse off state, which makes me think that his parents died when he was maybe not young, but like maybe 20s and stuff like that. So he's been alone for a very long time because of that. And I think that may have been part of the kind of downward spiral that his life took.
Yeah, and like the childlike thing, like the way the mom talks to him, they constantly bring up things like, "Oh, he's so good at school, he's so gifted." You know, it's that very sort of childlike thing. And there's a moment where the young woman, it's where the mom's prepared dessert, which is interesting because earlier in the film he says that don't expect them to put on a good spread, and then sort of like in this dreamlike world, there's this amazing just feast of food. There's jelly, there's like. I think that's probably like a pig that's been roasted or something. I think it focuses on that.
Pig, which I thought was also linking back to the pig earlier in the film.
And I think it's when they're eating the Yule log, and the way that the young woman's eating it, she never eats it herself. She's almost like spoon feeding Jesse. It's a very childlike thing. It's like almost like Here Comes the Airplane kind of thing. It's that constant regression that you see throughout the film with his character. As he goes through like loads of different points of his life.
I mean, you get these kind of influences throughout the entire film. Like the moment where she looks at this was one from the trailer, which made me think, okay, what's going on here? Because I saw in the trailer, she's looking at a family photo, and he says, "Oh, that's me when I was younger," and she's like, "No, that was me." Yeah, and that made me think, what kind of horror film is this? What kind of psychological horror film is this going to be? I thought, just from watching that from the trailer and from watching it in the film, with the context, I thought maybe it was going to be like a stolen identity kind of thing. Maybe she was like not a lost twin or something like that, but they wanted to induct her into the family, so they've kind of taken her photos and stuff like that. That kind of eerie vibe, but instead it is just literally she is him. Like that is her looking at him like all the time, which is crazy.
But you wanted to know my interpretation on the dance. I knew you were going to ask me this because the whole ending of this film is like one long interpretive dance sequence, which is very strange. So I was reading the plot of the book, and there's a whole part in the book where it actually follows it more or less very closely right up until the part where they get to the school, it seems, because in the book, the young woman goes inside the school, the janitor's there, and then she hides in a closet with Jesse Plemons' character of Jake, and then she is killed by the janitor with a coat hanger when it's stabbed in her neck. And there is like a whole stabbing moment in the dance sequence of the film. It's done under very different circumstances. So we have like the initial meeting in the school corridor, and the two dancers sort of stand behind the two leads and then act through them, and then we focus on the dancers for the majority of the ending. That to me was going through the state of sort of, meeting someone, the initial courtship, everything's great. We see a wedding. And then the janitor comes in and sort of tries to kidnap the woman, I believe, and Jake's character as the dancer fights the janitor and is stabbed by the janitor and killed, and then she's carried away. I get the first part up till the marriage, so that clearly never happened. I don't think. I think that was all a vision. That was like sort of the dreamlike, idyllic, meeting someone, the dogs, the cats, the white picket fence.
It's the La La Land ending. It's the what could have been, and then the reality afterwards.
And I think it was the reality of that. Maybe when he became a janitor, and maybe when he was consumed by the longing of the past. I think it is that juxtaposition of two lives. That's the life that he wanted, and the reality is that janitor one. Now, I don't think it was it's obviously not a physical death. I mean, you could argue that it is, because the janitor, also being Jake's character, is the one that stabs and kills Jake in that dance sequence. So you could interpret that as a suicide, or that killing of the past, killing of that beautiful image of this life that he could have led with this woman.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is, the dance is kind of him idealizing what would have happened if he met this girl, if he'd gone to that kind of, if he'd talked to her in the pub, and if he'd talked to her in the bar, and they would have been together, he would have been happy, he would have had a good life. But then the janitor coming in at the end is kind of his realization of, that's all in the past, that's now gone. You can't hold on to that forever. Mm-hmm. And the younger part of himself, the memory of that he put together of himself being with her, wants to hang on to that. So the only way that he's able to get around that is the only way you're able to get rid of any idea, really, and that's just kill it. Mm-hmm. So he kind of kills his idealized past self so that he can maybe finally truly have peace, which he does in the end, because he goes to the award ceremony. He's finally reunited with like all the people from his life that may have influenced him and stuff like that. But yeah.
And I just thought of another thing, because you have sort of that very final image at the end. I don't think it is. I think it ends on a more hopeful note, because you have the janitor sort of stripping naked, going crazy in the car, having a mental breakdown.
I think he's already dead at that point. That's the thing.
See, he walks into the school. He's walking down this very narrow corridor with the CGI, not CGI, sorry, with the animated pig in tow. And it's almost like it's sort of like a being born again kind of thing. It's that regression. It's going back to the beginning. When you're born into the world, obviously you come out completely naked, but the pig says, "Come on, let's get you dressed." And then obviously after the credits is the car engine starting up. So that to me is like, come on, you need to carry on, give this another shot.
I do not at all. I think this is a dark ending, and I like it for that. I'd be okay with the hopeful ending, but I feel like the finality of kind of him coming to terms with things, I'm okay with that as well. I'm okay with either side of the ending, because I didn't watch through the credits till the engine turned over. So I'm happy with that kind of, in my head, he did pass on, and that was kind of how it ended.
You can't argue that isn't part of the film.
No, I can't argue with that at all. I can't argue with that at all.
I think it's an acceptance. The whole film is kind of like one long therapy session for him.
Yeah.
It's him assessing everything that happened, pulling everything apart, from failed relationships to dysfunctional family, to failed exploits. We learned that he was a painter, and it probably never came of anything. And he was this very talented kid that, they talk about. The mum has this long spiel about the genetic lottery, I think she calls it, where some people just seem naturally gifted. Some people are gifted, but sadly they never get that chance in life, and they never amount to anything. I think it's him coming to terms with that, accepting that, finally being okay with it, and then in a very melancholy, ambiguous way, somehow striving on and trying to persevere on through it. That's my takeaway from it. I'm trying to think
it's good that this film has caused a good debate.
Yeah, no, and this is what I was going to finish on, is that we've had a long break from films. Like, yes, over the lockdown and everything, we have been watching films. There's been a lot of rescreenings I've gone to at the cinema, reliving older films. There's been some newer ones along the way. We've had Tenet, which, very thought-provoking movie again. I know that we did have very different opinions on that film, and maybe some of us liked it more than the rest of us did. But there was a discussion to be had there. There was a 2-hour, 15-minute discussion to be had there, which you can go and view on our channel. It was a really, really good discussion on it. And then straight after that, we kind of fall off the wagon, and we have New Mutants, and we have Mulan. And then I had this movie again, and I don't know if this is a film that I am going to rush back and watch anytime soon. I think it's What was that film that we watched on Film Club with the ghost in the sheet?
A Ghost Story.
A Ghost Story. That's a very obvious title. I don't know why I blanked on that title. It's a film like that. A Ghost Story is probably not a film that I will rush back and see. It's not one that I'm going to say everyone has to witness, but it's an experience that stayed with me. There's a conversation to be had there, many different interpretations. And in a world of New Mutants and Mulans, it's honestly night and day. And I'm finding myself constantly now, maybe sort of my old age, as I trudge on ever closer to 30 as the years go by. I'm gravitating more towards films like this where you can actually deconstruct it. There are multiple different ways. It's a film with a message that's trying to say something. Some people, if someone's turned off from like symbolism in a film and, you know, these long-winded, non-connected, non-linear sort of structures and everything like that, if that's not your bag then and you don't like this film, hey, I will completely understand. This will not be a film that's everyone's cup of tea. And I think some people might go onto Netflix, see this thing, click it, and come away with a bad rep, because it is a film that leaves you sort of scratching your head at the end of the film. And it certainly did with me. And it's only through, you know, talking to you, having this discussion and sort of airing my thoughts out where I feel like I've got my own personal takeaway from this film. You've got a very similar takeaway, but we have very different interpretations of the ending. And as I said, anyone watching this film will probably have a different takeaway from the film. So I'm glad that there is a platform for films like this, because films like this probably wouldn't get wide release at cinemas. I think it got a very limited release at cinemas back in August, I think. And obviously now it's on Netflix. So just more films like this. Just there is a place and there is a time for dumb, schlocky blockbuster films like Fast 9. I'm looking forward to Fast and Furious 9 next year, because there are a place for films like that as well. But I want more films like this, and this is why I'm really looking forward to London Film Festival in a month's time, with the sheer amount of films we're going to have from that, and then obviously moving into Oscar season next year. I'm finding myself now looking forward to films like that more, because there's more to talk about and they stick with you and you think about them, and that's why I'm a film fan. So no more Mulans, please.
I was going to say, I have a very similar kind of thing to this film. I do want to touch on it quickly. I think this film will probably be nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay.
I agree. Yeah.
Possibly an outside shout for Best Supporting Actress, ? Or would they go with Best Supporting Act or Best Actor? Not probably Best Actor nomination, but Best Supporting Actress could be.
I think Supporting Actress definitely, which is weird because she is kind of a lead, but it's obviously in terms of the narrative, and that was going to be another thing I was going to bring up, in that I see your interpretation that this is solely about Jake's character.
Yeah.
I think that also does a discredit to her character, because you have those moments in the film where she has all the missed calls, but then she is credited as the young woman with multiple different sort of aliases throughout the film, which doesn't really give her an identity of her own. Yeah. So I'm unsure on my reading on that, but yeah, I definitely think she needs some kind of nomination from this. I thought she was fantastic. I really did.
As far as this film's aware, it's difficult because I criticized Tenet for alienating audiences, and people would come out the film finding it confusing and wouldn't like it for that same thing. But I'm saying that this film is good because it's confusing and it will make you think afterwards. And that's quite a thing to say, that I think this film gets the right balance of that, at least, because there is interpretations of it. Instead of it being with Tenet, there is almost, after you've watched it a few times, there is definitely a direct kind of this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. Whereas this film, I mean, we've watched it once. I will probably watch it again at some point and I'll have a completely different interpretation of it. So moving that aside, I personally think this is, outside of the Oscar films from last year that was released in 2020, this is my favorite film I've seen so far this year, which is very interesting, especially going into kind of the London Film Festival stuff that's going to be coming out soon. We've got a few more kind of big blockbusters as well that are going to be coming out towards the end of the year. We haven't really talked about this on the channel, but we're going to struggle making our top 5 best and worst this year. We'll put it like that.
Well, I know I certainly know where 2 of them are going to be.
I know where at least 2 films are going to be so far this year from what I've seen. I'm not outright saying this is the best film of the year straight away, because there are still films that need to come out yet, but so far it is running the race, it is leading it. I just really connected with this, and I really found it just interesting that we're able to have this debate about it afterwards. I feel that the experience has lasted past the film, which you don't get often, because it plays on your mind over a few days. It keeps you thinking. It keeps you kind of churning over, coming up with different ideas and stuff like that. Even throughout this review, like we've talked about stuff which we didn't actually discuss before the review went forward. We had things which we just kind of thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, oh, that makes sense now as well.
We thought we'd be on this thing for half the length. We thought we'd be on for like 15, 20 minutes tops, and just discussing one thing snowballs effects onto the next, and then we're deconstructing the whole film. But no, I mean,
either way, I would wholly recommend watching this film. If you're into this kind of cinema, if you're into kind of the award season kind of films, the films which make you think, films which are existentialism, nihilism, those kind of vibes from films, if you like that stuff, if you like reading into philosophy, then please comment below. Tell us how you found this film. We want to hear your opinion as well. We want to have this discussion continuing on after this review is done. So please like, comment, share, and obviously subscribe. We're trying to get up to that 2K goal by the end of the year. Go onto Facebook, just find us, type in Cinema Savvy. Go onto Twitter, that is @cinema_savvy. And if you go into the description, we still have both t-shirts available. So that is the Nolan print t-shirt with the Syncope kind of logo, and also the normal Cinema Savvy t-shirt, which you've seen us wearing in other videos, which I've genuinely worn out in public. I really like it. It is actually a nice t-shirt to wear.
It's a very comfy t-shirt, and we're not just saying that because we're trying to hawk our t-shirts. It is a genuinely very comfy t-shirt. But yeah, no, this was an awesome review to do. It's good to have this conversation. I will be probably watching a bit of an easier film to digest now for the rest of the day. I need to watch the 2 Bill and Ted films in anticipation for Bill and Ted Face the Music. We will have reviews on all 3 of those films next week. So it'll be nice to talk about those films because we haven't really talked about them on the channel before. And yeah, so thank you to everyone who may have tuned into this tonight, commented along. I'll probably be manning the comments at some point tonight, which you'll see anyway. It's so weird doing one of these pre-recorded. Anyway, we've taught you to death by now. Have a good one, stay safe, and we'll see you guys on the next review. Take care, everyone.